Back in 1999, the movie The 13th Warrior exited production hell and entered theaters for a late summer try at making back its budget. Unfortunately, those of us who weren't taking Prince's advice and partying like it was 1999 in 1999, or preparing for the orgy of blood and death that would likely follow the minor programming fix that was Y2K, were spending our theater dollars on Star Wars The Phantom Menace, The Sixth Sense, Toy Story 2, The Matrix, American Beauty, Fight Club, and quite a few other options. 1999 was a really good year for movies. Ignore that one. Editing error. Mind your business. Those little hearts feel really patronizing. So The 13th Warrior cashed in about $60 million at the worldwide box office, losing an undisclosed amount that most place in the $100 to $125 million range. Although the movie has become a cult classic over time, mostly because I say so and the people I know think it's cool, even though it lost more money than anyone in 1999. I'm going to break down the context, storyline, characters, world-building and themes for The 13th Warrior, because that's what I do. Thanks for the view. For context, let's start with the harsh reality of cinema back in the day. The traditional flow of a commercial film was ideally from theater to VHS or DVD to premium cable to basic cable. Going straight to DVD or being one of those made-for-TV movies was grisly fucking death. It basically stamped the project with a "this is shit" designation, so you had to get your movie into theaters. But deep down, I think everyone knows that it's impossible to predict audience spending habits, and many projects are going to make their money on the small screens, not the big ones. So getting in and getting out of theaters, breaking even on production costs and advertising, is the expectation. While more than that is mostly hope and a prayer. This is doubly true when rival studios are running out projects with a lot of buzz. If anyone made the claim in 1999 that they felt good about going head-to-head with the return of the Star Wars franchise after a 16-year hiatus, they're full of shit. So The 13th Warrior probably would have been an ideal movie for a streaming service to prop up its in-house catalog, but those didn't exist. So my guess was Touchstone Pictures was hoping to keep the budget tight, leverage the notoriety Antonio Banderas received from The Mask of Zorro the previous year, and maybe audiences will make it a sleeper hit or something after they get done cheering on Annie Baby and his pod racer for the whatever time. But after initial test screenings went really not good, they fired director John McTiernan and brought in the author of the source material, Michael Crichton, to do some reshoots and re-edits to get the bastard over the line. The budget ballooned from about $85 million to about $160 million. Antonio's drawing power never made its way into the upper echelon of stardom, even with Latino culture being the new hotness in the late 90s. Yes, they bon. Very good. And The Sixth Sense, Matrix, Blair Witch Project, and to a certain degree The Mummy ended up being the unexpected overachievers on the big screen in 1999. So the film was a massive flop at the box office. But it's always been a decent movie to catch on a small screen, and it's based on a very old tale that's fascinated readers for centuries. Back in the 70s, author Michael Crichton, known for such works as Jurassic Park, Disclosure, Congo, and Sphere, all of which were made into movies in the 90s, was having an argument with a literary friend over the 10th century epic poem Beowulf. His friend thought it was lame. Crichton thought it wasn't. So in the time-honored tradition of getting in the last word, he wrote the novel Eaters of the Dead to present a version of Beowulf that is more accessible than a direct translation of the epic poem. We're talking about source material that author and linguist J.R.R. Tolkien once conceded translating from Old English to New is a bitch and a half. So yeah, not every reworking of something old for a modern audience is by default some bullshit. Crichton's novel merges the first part of a historical narrative by a Muslim named Ahmed ibn Fadlan, who traveled from Baghdad to modern-day Bulgaria in the 10th century, with a less fantastic and more grounded version of the Beowulf story, and presents it in a playful sort of lost manuscript, discovered and recovered fashion, with fake references and imaginary footnotes, like The Princess Bride, only not as obnoxious for the reader. For those a bit rusty on their 10th century Old English epic poetry, the story of Beowulf is this. The king of the Danes built a great hall to party like it's 1999 in, but a monster named Grendel has been wreaking havoc on it for over a decade. A heroic Geat named Beowulf, which would be a Swede on today's map, decides to lend a hand and travels to the hall, squares off with Grendel, and tears the motherfucker's arm out of its socket, killing the monster. Grendel's mother takes that shit personal, so she gets a revenge kill in, and Beowulf swims to a cave at the bottom of a lake to square off with Grendel's mom, where he collects her head. The story then jumps forward 50 years where Beowulf is king of the Geats and all is good in the world, until some mental colossus steals a golden cup from a dragon's hoard, which is never sound decision-making. The dragon goes ape and wreaks havoc on Geatland, until Beowulf slays it at the cost of his own life. So we have monsters, dragons, high fantasy, and grand adventure cast in the myth and legend mold. But the 13th Warrior approaches the source material like Wolfgang Petersen and company approached Homer's Iliad in the movie Troy, reducing the magical grand adventure into a more grounded human experience. The storyline opens with a mini-montage and exposition dump, establishing that the male lead is a poet who fucked around with someone's missus, and instead of getting the axe, got a shit assignment as ambassador to the ragged-as-fuck European lands of the North, which were basically a free-fire zone of warring tribes in the 10th century. So he'll be the surrogate audience that will learn the things the filmmakers want to teach the viewers. And as a poet, it's implied that he'll be the one to write the Beowulf epic someday. He falls in with a merry band of Viking savages who are having a funeral for their former king, But word comes down that another Viking king in the far north needs help dealing with a terror nobody wants to put a name to. A sage mother reads some tea leaves and lays out the need for 13 warriors, one of which can't be a Northman. So our guys volunteered into service. Have a nice trip.
Bye! Have fun storming the castle!
The merry band of savages get themselves in Northern Europe, have a meet and greet with the local royalty, and get into some shit with the nameless terror the film teases as maybe men, maybe beasts. We aren't 100% sure just yet. The baby girl says what's up to the male lead. The boys build up some defensive ramparts and get into some shit with the locals. And action set piece number 2 pops off, in which the villains are revealed to be men dressed like bears. Another sage mother offers some vague advice on how to get over on the clan of the Cave Bear cult. And what's left of the merry band of savages head out to play some offense instead of defense. They find the clan of the Cave Bear's cave, make their way into its depths, and Beowulf by another name collects the head of the clan of the Cave Bear's bottom bitch, although she got a dose of poison in him before getting the hard goodbye. They escape through an underground river, and we have action set piece number 3, which opts for a slow-mo presentation in order to give a different look and feel than the other 2 set pieces. Beowulf by another name kills the big pimp of the clan of the Cave Bear, then dies from the poison. But the narrator learns something from his heroic example, and will commit his deeds to the written word for his tale to be remembered through the ages. Roll credits. For characters, let's start with the male lead, Ahmed Ibn Fadlan, played by Antonio Banderas. As the surrogate audience, the character works. The viewer is indirectly being taught things that he and we wouldn't already know, but the other characters in the story certainly would. I also like that the epic poem is referenced by way of a poet experiencing a version of Beowulf's story and committing it to paper later. But in terms of a hero's journey, it doesn't quite work. We're told in the opening scenes Ibn is shallow, self-serving, weak, and a bit of a coward.
That's the woman's sound.
But none of his behaviors reinforce those qualities through the storyline. For example, he doesn't hesitate to rush out from behind the village defenses by himself to save a child as the enemy closes in. So it feels like we're being told one thing and shown another. Beowulf by another name and the journey he experiences are meant to instruct and transform him into someone with depth, commitment to others, strength, and bravery.
He's going to get killed.
That is possible.
We will die here.
It is possible.
But we needed to clearly see him as less, clearly see him in contrast to someone who is more, then clearly see him become more for the hero's journey to come full circle. In the final scenes, when he reflects on the experiences that made him into a better person, it feels more like he's being a bit hard on himself than reminding us of the transformation we saw on screen. Beowulf by another name is played by a Czech-Canadian actor named Vladimir Kulik. He captures the idea of the character, brave without being reckless, stoic without being humorless, and savage without being mindless. He's a product of his times, which means picking up the sword to sort out differences in opinion, but he sees the value of education in a way his peers do not, and shows he's willing and able to learn new things. He acknowledges that playing cutthroat games of thrones with political rivals is a necessary evil, and doesn't hesitate to do so, but has the wherewithal to recognize this sort of thing is costly and frustratingly pointless in the grand scheme of things.
As you say, foolish and expensive.
His motivational speech before the final battle is the Viking funeral rites from the start of the film, which feels like a pretty badass thing to say before going into battle. And I always like when something from early in a film is reintroduced late to reinforce how much has changed in the viewer's understanding of characters and events.
Lo, there do I see my father.
Lo, there do I see my father.
But the character is handicapped by the movie's approach to world building, which I'll get to in a moment. The rest of Beowulf by another name's merry band of savages are a merry band, which expresses a philosophical concept. They believe fate has foreordained the lengths of their lives and times of their deaths, and there isn't anything they can do to change that fact, which is liberating in the sense that no matter what I do, or what attitude I take doing it, my life isn't going to be made longer or shorter by it, so I might as well enjoy myself. I'm off the hook as far as responsibility goes.
Your fate is fixed. Fear profits man nothing.
It's a worldview that clashes with the male lead's perspective, and our own as viewers living in a world with a different point of orientation on subjects like predetermination and fate, so it's interesting enough. Although the merry band knows to get serious when it's time to throw down, so the characters don't become too farcical by laughing it up too much in situations that wouldn't put a smile on anyone's face. The main yeah buddy sidekick in particular shows a lot of charisma. He's played by a Norwegian actor named Dennis Storhoy, or something more Norwegian sounding, not a language I speak, and he does a good job being likable. The movie also makes an effort to bring women into the mix in what is admittedly a pretty toxic masculine era of warrior societies getting into some bloody man shit. There's 2 sage mothers directing the efforts of the merry band of savages. The clan of the Cave Bear cult is led by a woman, and the Queen of the Great Hall is clearly the brains behind the operation, and shows the intelligence to make good decisions and the strength to make hard decisions.
Don't let them be taken.
Actress there is named Diane Venora, very talented. A love interest is brought into the mix, but not to show some heat for the artistic portion of the film, but rather to provide a short scene that does a lot. The boys are riding off to war, likely to their deaths, and with the brief gesture she gets across how this sort of thing isn't easy for the people left behind. Be it a mother, lover, or another, It takes strength and perseverance to watch someone go off on a grand adventure that has a high probability of resulting in their death, and just wait for it all to play out. This sort of thing demands respect, and I like that they found an understated way to get that across, rather than making a big show of emoting some bullshit in the cliche unsupportive wife trope Hollywood often thinks is a good idea to add emotional stakes, but is a bit insulting to the lady folk who support their loved ones rather than saddle them with more emotional baggage when they ride off to war. For world building, the movie takes a grand epic with fantastic elements and reduces it into a grounded human experience with a greater emphasis on believability. So instead of monsters like Grendel and his mother, we have men in bear outfits who behave monstrously. Instead of a dragon breathing fire, we have a warband carrying torches giving the impression of a fireworm from a distance. Instead of impossible feats of strength, we have improbable feats of strength, that sort of thing. We also see a commitment to believability with character developments. Ibn doesn't speak Viking gibberish. As they venture to the north, he slowly learns it. Can you actually learn a language by just sitting listening to others blather on if no point of reference? Doubtful. But the movie is taking the time to give some kind of reason to believe the things we see, rather than just saying, okay, now someone can do something they couldn't before because we need them to. Ibn can't fight, but the movie needs him to do so. So they change his sword from something a Viking would wield to a scimitar in the shape and weight a 10th century Muslim might be more comfortable with. Okay, you gave me a reason why his martial prowess might reasonably be improved, so I'll accept that reason. We see a horse go big with a jump early on, so it feels believable when it does so later on. There's a commitment to not pressuring the audience's suspension of disbelief in the presentation of this world. We also have references to the epic poem, Beowulf slew Grendel by tearing his arm out of the socket. The movie references that with a shot of a severed arm. Beowulf got himself into Grendel's mother's cave by swimming down into a lake. After slaying the clan of the cave bear's bottom bitch, the boys got out of the cave by swimming through a body of water. Beowulf is given a sword at one point in the poem. Beowulf by another name is given a sword at one point in the movie. Always interesting to look for little Easter eggs if you're familiar with the source material of a movie. But on the downside, we're taking a grand epic with fantastic elements and reducing it into a more grounded human experience. We're making things smaller and more ordinary. I mentioned this handicapped the Beowulf by another name character, and it does. At the end of the epic poem, Beowulf takes on a dragon, sees that he can't win and live to fight another day, but chooses to go back at the creature knowing that he's going to die, but it's a sacrifice he needs to make on behalf of others. Very heroic with martyrdom overtones for an intended audience of Christian listeners. Beowulf by another name doesn't have an opportunity to make such a grand gesture on behalf of others. He gets schwacked with the poison in the fight with the clan of the cave bear's bottom bitch, and he's dying, whether he lies in bed or comes out to fight in the last sequence. There isn't a sacrifice that's voluntarily made here. When you make a story smaller and more human, it doesn't make it better or worse, but it may make it better suited to something more low-key than a movie theater, since instead of a grand epic, it's an interesting tale. For themes, we have the general notion that an epic poem like Beowulf on its face isn't a believable narrative, but it's not outside the realm of possibility that real events inspired a story that became layered in exaggeration, imagination, and the impossible through centuries of retelling, which is true for all works from the distant past, be it Beowulf, Gilgamesh, Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, King Arthur and Camelot, and on and on. We have the theme of a 10th century Europe being a savage world made thus by the animals that walk on 2 legs, not 4. Our first impression of Beowulf by another name is him killing a rival to his newly inherited position, probably a family member of some kind. During the creation of defensive ramparts to try to hold off the clan of the cave bear, the merry band of savages are forced to play some political games by picking a fight and killing the henchman of the prince of the region, since he was stirring up some shit behind their backs. As if nobody had anything better to do at that moment than play politics. As an aside, the one cause and effect omission the movie makes is the backstabbing prince just kind of disappears after the duel between his henchman and the yeah buddy Viking. But he's not central to the plot anyway. There's a theme of bravery and decency being good qualities to have, like in the epic poem. There's a theme that culture is learned, not ingrained at birth, that plays out through the culture clashes between Ibn and the merry band of savages, as they learn to see through their differences and care for each other as brothers in arms across the storyline. Thematically, nothing is bad, but at the same time nothing is particularly great. Although not every story told in a movie needs to be great. It just needed to be great if it was going to recoup about $160 million at the box office in the face of strong opposition at a time when movie tickets were a third the price as they are today, and there were 2 billion less people on the planet. In conclusion, The 13th Warrior was a fun movie back in 1999, and it's still a good watch today. I wouldn't call it exceptional by any means. Even the cinematic shots of the landscapes are nice to look at, but not breathtaking in their scope. I think Crichton got the last word in his debate with that colleague, in that the story of Beowulf can be made interesting when told the right way. But the key word here is interesting, rather than something more effusive. If epic source material retold in a more grounded fashion is your jam, the movies Troy, King Arthur, and Robin Hood all take that approach. Although the only one I enjoyed on that list is Troy. The other 2 kinda blow a fat hog. So my prescription today is if you're interested in a movie from 1999 that earned even less money at the box office than The 13th Warrior, but also doesn't suck, we have The Insider, Office Space, and Lock, Stock, and 2 Smoking Barrels. Okay, 10 Things I Hate About You also meets that criteria. And it's a modern retelling of Shakespeare's Taming of the Shrew. Oh, fuck it. I like it. Mind your business. Anyway, I'm Dr. Balthazar. Like what you like. Don't what you don't. It's all your call, Kemosabe.